Friday edition of Wrestling Observer Radio. Garrett and Dave here after we missed last weekend, and you had tweeted that you were doing interviews for a TV show, and then I joked that they were bringing Learning the Ropes back, and you were going to be in the Lyle Alzado role. But it was not that. You were doing more documentary stuff, I'm assuming?
Documentary stuff. Yeah, I'm not supposed to talk about it yet, but when the time comes, I will. Right. But I had a lot of fun on one. I had a lot of fun, period. But one of them in particular, one of the shows I did was really a lot of fun. So yeah.
All right, lots of stuff to talk about, including All Out, Fallout. You had some numbers for pay-per-view, and I think Tony Khan said that they did better than last year's show. What does it look like on your end?
It looks in the 100 range, maybe very slightly above. So I don't know, it's pretty hard to go 2 weeks after a show. I mean, it's probably better 2 weeks than 1 week. And they went 1 week last year, and they beat 100 last year, which I thought was kind of the goal. This one, I don't really know how to evaluate it because obviously, they're not as strong. All Out did not do the numbers All In did not do the numbers that last year's show did, and nor did I expect it to, because the novelty was, very different, but it still did great numbers. Mm-hmm. All Out, I would say the number, I think that I was, I don't remember what my over under was, but it was probably a little bit under that, maybe 95 or something. And a lot of people thought I was way, way low and thought it would be much higher, but at the end of the day, I think that the lesson is that that's what they're going to do 2 weeks after a big show. You can't come back that quick. I thought, the thing on this show that intrigued me the most was how they did I thought a great angle with Swerve and Adam Page with the home, right? Mm-hmm. Just the way it was all done. I thought it was great. But at the end of the day, what determines a great angle? And it's does it turn on more people than it turns off? And how was the reaction going to be? And I think most people expected more than this, this got. I don't think that it was if you took that out, would it have done 85 instead? We'll never know, but I don't think that I don't see that it moved numbers to a great degree. If it moved numbers at all, I think the number was probably around where it would probably have ended up. It wasn't a game changer or anything like that. It was not like, a Bruno Sammartino, Larry Zbyszko, or even I'm trying to think of an angle that really, a modern angle where, you just go that's a money angle. And this one, it really, I don't know. It did help the house late. They did sell a lot of tickets late, but as far as the pay-per-view went, it's one of the lower numbers that they've done, but it was going to be because of several factors. Number one, they're not as hot as they once were, obviously. Number two, coming 2 weeks after another show. So,
and next year they won't have that same issue because they're moving up All In.
Right. Now, one of the things, though, if you remember last year's show did not have a world title match. This year's show, had a world title match. This year's show had a stronger grudge match on top. So it should have done better. Maybe it'll end up being the same. Maybe it'll end up a little lower. So that was the number. But the thing that I was trying to learn from is Swerve and Adam Page with that angle. Is that going to be a big difference maker to a modern pay-per-view show? And the answer was that it, as far as getting extra people to buy, I don't think it was. It was just if it helped, it helped a little. And I don't know that it even helped much at all. It was an angle that, a lot of people liked. I thought it was really well done, but well done angles. It's harder now anyway. People buy shows for shows, they're not buying them. I don't think they take the stuff seriously. So, it's, whatever. It didn't do a giant number. It did lower numbers than most people predicted it would. I think it did around the same number that I predicted it would. So there you go.
When you look back at last year in AEW, you just said that the all-in number last year was great, but it was also just the interest of that show, first time in that market and in that big stadium. But maybe the all-out show right after it, I wonder how much of the I don't know, the higher pay-per-view numbers has to do with the world title. Like, is their world title and who the champion is necessarily a draw? Because last year it was MJF, but it was in the
but he didn't
stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means that angle was hot as much as people like to make fun of that angle and how.
Well, that angle was very good for ratings until it just, the problem with that angle is that it was building to a payoff and we never got the payoff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people were very into it, but they were also waiting for the split and everything. And by the time they did the split, Adam Cole was already injured and you just couldn't do anything with it. It just was like, they did the big reveal. Okay, they did a great reveal in World's End, which probably helped World's End number because that number was high. But what can you do afterwards? Because, MJF was gone afterwards. Adam Cole still hasn't come back to wrestle.
Has there been any word on him?
He was backstage at the show walking around, at the pay-per-view in Chicago walking around and everything, and he was fine and everything. But as far as a date to come back, I haven't heard anything, but I'm hoping it's kind of soon. But I don't, it's one of those things where with AEW, because they want things to be secret, they're probably not going to give me a date,
Is that why Wardlow is also out? Because they're waiting for Adam Cole to come back?
I have no idea what's going on with Wardlow. I don't have any kind of an answer to that one. Sometimes they don't use guys. I mean, there's a whole list of guys and there's various reasons why they don't use them, they don't have an idea for them, or, sometimes it's guys who are uncooperative. And I don't know, I don't want people to go, oh, Wardlow's uncooperative. I didn't say that for him, but there are guys that you don't see. I mean, there was a guy, and I don't want to mention his name right now because it's just not, whatever. But I was talking about him and it's like, why don't they use this guy? And then, immediately I heard the reasons why, which were just basically, essentially you can't count on him doing, what they want him to do and being whatever. There were reasons that they had because they just felt it wasn't, it wasn't anything that they had for him. And they have other guys they want to plug in that they're happier with. And there's your answer.
I mean, that's an interesting thing to be up against, though, because if that person who is harder to work with has a higher possibility of, maybe drawing ratings or being a main eventer.
I don't think any of the guys that we're speaking about fall in that category. I mean, the guy who would fall in that category was Punk, who absolutely was a big draw for them. And they didn't, when he was healthy, they never pulled him, no matter what happened. If you remember, they always used him when he was healthy. When it's a marginal guy, I mean, a lot of the rest of these guys, it's not like it's going to make a difference. So if you're not a difference maker, if you're not like a Punk or something, and you have that issue, they got so many guys they can use. I mean, they're loaded with guys who can wrestle and have good matches and can talk.
Some of those folks, though, are being paid to be difference makers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So you had a very interesting line in The Observer, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and then we'll move on to some of the TV stuff. You were talking about the chair shot in the main event at All Out.
Yes.
And you wrote, but given AEW has now done this twice in the last 3 pay-per-views, it looks like it's going to be a thing, and we are 17 years past Chris Benoit, and the mentality toward wrestlers from far too many fans is that they are cattle, meaning the wrestlers are cattle, who should be there for our entertainment, and it's up to them to decide if they are fine with it, and we don't care. And then you mentioned how when All Out was done, you had a negative feeling based on how that main event went. And so I was thinking about this because my overall, I think you gave it 4.5 stars. My overall summary of the main event was the fans were not interested until those guys were going over the top of normal cage matches because they knew that that's what they were waiting for. So they were kind of,
I mean, a lot of the stuff is like it may be gross, but it's not unsafe. Okay, but there was stuff that's also, the power bomb on the cinder block to me is like kind of like, man, it's like I've seen guys break their back on something like that.
I'm not letting a wrestler stick a needle in my mouth after we've just been wrestling for 30 minutes. That may be wrestler safe, but that's not like normal people safe.
Yeah, I don't know. That one didn't bother me as much as some of the things, but I also thought
it was like a sick out.
Okay, but I also thought it would bother a lot of people. And the key is not if it bothers me. The key is, does it turn on more people than it turns off? And that's a tough question to answer. I just remember again, like, it's like Terry Funk who would say from his father. And it's like, if we do something that causes people to not want to watch wrestling with their families, we have done something wrong, which is funny because he did some crazy stuff in his life, but that was kind of like his litmus test is like, if we want the families to watch together and we want them to have a good time. We want the parents to watch with their kids and all that. And they may get mad at the heels and furious, but we don't want the parents to go, we can't let our kids watch this. And I did get people who, said, that, I wouldn't let my kid watch this.
Didn't like, Mercedes write something about that in like maybe in a blog post or
she wrote something? I actually didn't read what she wrote, but I know
something about her brother. Like maybe she wouldn't have wanted her brother to watch the show or something.
Yeah. She had like a mixed reaction, I think, to certain things. But yeah, it's like it's like if we're watching, unfortunately, for me, like if you were watching with your wife or I'm watching with my girlfriend or whatever the situation is. And I know, believe me, I've watched enough wrestling with my girlfriend, and she walks out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be embarrassed to be a wrestling fan with people who I am in the family with, so to speak. It's like if it's why I don't mind the blood, and people may not like the blood. That's a different thing. But I don't want someone to look at me and go, how can you watch this stuff? And I don't mean wrestling because it's fake, because there will be people who say that, but because of stuff that's needless, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that's the line. I don't know what the line is. You never really know. But I think the cattle line is, I think that's more in reference to the fact that, I have seen and talked to and know too many wrestlers from my childhood who got dementia later in life, including some of the biggest names ever. And, my parents were old and I knew all their friends, and I never saw that in them, what I saw in the wrestlers. It's two completely different worlds. I don't have a stat sheet for you on this one, but I can tell you for sure. Okay. So it's like, I want to learn from that. And I know that there's an inherent thing that when you're doing a physical activity, it's going to break your body down and things like that. But I don't want, families to have to go through dementia of guys, like just Sonny King last week. So the last 10 years of his life, he was suffering from dementia, right? And he's hardly the only one, I have to go through that. And, they say the chair shot safe. I just remember, the guys that took the hard chairs, and maybe they weren't as safe, but they didn't take, and they weren't taking the hard chairs every night either. But the ones who took the hard chairs, a lot of them had a lot of, Paraguay is the one that comes into mind for me, because I saw him take some really brutal chair shots. And then by the time he was in his 60s, he was gone. And it's like, this guy was, one of the greatest of the great, the most super charismatic guys that I ever saw. And it was sad, what happened. And I just don't want to see that with this generation of guys. So that kind of stuff bothers me. It just does. It just, I'm never going to be happy with it. If there's a doctor who is a concussion doctor and studies this and will tell me that, and you can show the chairs and how they gimmick them and everything, go, this is perfectly safe, I will change my mind, of course.
Yeah.
But I haven't, that has not happened. I've had wrestling people try to explain it, but I don't know that they have that knowledge to do so. When I hear a noise like that, it's kind of, and then, but I think that the thing is that the reaction people is just like, oh, if they want to do it, let them do it. And it's kind of like, I think that, again, in a post CTE world where we know this stuff, going back in time, when we already made those mistakes before that period, to go back with the mentality before that period again, because it was like that decades ago when it was a bad thing. To me, that's a really, I just really, I can't handle that attitude. That's all, of just, oh, they're cattle for our enjoyment type of a thing. It's like, I mean, I know that they're going to, again, there's a lot of stuff where you beat up your body and everything. And one of the wonderful things is that medical, medicine and healing and everything. I mean, the stuff that the guys did before, I mean, today, a lot of the guys, I mean, we have advancements in medicine. We have, you can replace body parts, but you can't replace the brain and everything like that. But guys are being able to take the stuff and live better lives. And they also have a lot more money for medical care later in life that the guys in the past didn't have. There's a lot of real positives. They're not working as many dates as they did in the past. But, I mean, but whatever. I mean, I just don't want to see dementia in older wrestlers when it's not necessary.
I have a buddy who told me a story. I don't exactly remember the time frame, but it was during a wrestling convention or some sort of event, and he noticed that Nick Bockwinkel was kind of by himself, and so just saw Nick and was like, hey Nick, how's it going? And Nick didn't know where he was. He was trying to figure out how to get to some place, but he was by himself, and so my buddy was and his friend kind of helped Nick get to where maybe he could get some help to where he was. And that has stuck with him forever. And I know, the whole story.
Imagine if you talked to Nick Bockwinkel throughout his life.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever discussed that with you, but that is, my last conversations with him. And I didn't have many of those last conversations with him. I know people who did, but I had some. And, Nick Bockwinkel, I learned so much from Nick Bockwinkel. And, it was sad. It's a sad situation. I mean, he was a brilliant guy when it comes to pro wrestling. One of the smartest I ever talked to, and, that's a very sad situation there.
And I don't want to turn this conversation around to like who's in quality control in AEW and such, but I guess, I know Tony and his dad come from a pro sports background. The NFL, nobody has been under the gun about concussions more than the NFL. Mm-hmm. And the Miami Dolphins quarterback in last night's game, Tua, he got another concussion, and his concussions have been piling up, and they're talking about, what the future of his career even is. So when I connect the dots between smart people who come from the NFL, and then I'm watching wrestling and seeing some pretty crazy things, I do wonder, like, what's the thought process in what to do in wrestling versus how you're looking at this from a football perspective.
Well, the difference is when it comes to football, UFC, MMA, kickboxing, boxing, hockey, the nature of the sport is going to, these are dangers of the sport, and you can't have the sport without it. Okay. I mean, it's just going to happen. The beautiful thing about pro wrestling is you can protect yourself. Mm-hmm. You can do crazy things, but you can also protect yourself. Like if it's something like, I just consider certain things unnecessary. And the ones that are unnecessary are the ones that bother me. Wrestlers are going to beat their body up. It's impossible not to if you're a pro wrestler. Even if you wrestle Zack Sabre matches, you're still going to, it's not like Zack Sabre never gets injured. He does too. It's a sport that is filled with intrigue, as every sport does. Baseball, you played baseball and got hurt, right?
My knees are really bad right now.
Yeah, I mean, people who play basketball get hurt. I mean, every sport you're going to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, you just go to the gym and you lift weights in your shoulder. You know what I mean? It's like, that's inherent in sports, and that I accept that 100% in wrestling. Okay. But the stuff that's avoidable is the stuff that, like, I guess that's the stuff that bothers me. And the fact that people, and again, I mean, I come from an era where guys were dying left and right, and people were getting mad at me for thinking that maybe the promotion should do something about it. And it's like, oh, it's their fault for doing it. And it's like, well, if it contributes, you know what I mean? If these guys are all doing these things to perform and to look a certain way, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe we should do something about it. And thank God this generation's different. It's like, I mean, I'm not writing obituaries all the time of guys in their 30s anymore. And that's a wonderful thing compared to what wrestling once was. But some people, like, that didn't live through that, they just dismiss all that. Like, it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And they're, but again, they don't have that experience of time. And why should they? You know what I mean? Even if you study it, you're not really going to understand unless you live through it.
Yeah. You had also written about the AEW TV deal, which we believe is just impending. It's on its way. We'll hear about it in a couple weeks, probably. But
whenever we do. Yeah.
You also had the Fox piece of just the idea of what Fox could pay for AEW TV, and possibly
it's all theoretical. It's a theoretical piece. Like I said, I don't expect that AEW is going to be on Fox. But I mean, there's ways that I could economically work it out if they had never, because I mean, look at the Saturday baseball number, you know what I mean? And they pay, they're going to pay a hell of a lot more for Major League Baseball than they're ever going to pay for wrestling. But they're also going to be able to sell ads at a better rate for baseball than they are for wrestling. But the point is that, like, AEW could do those numbers, the baseball numbers that they get. They could do the numbers that they get on a lot of their nights, not every night. They certainly couldn't do the numbers that SmackDown does. But so it's not, like, ratings wise incomprehensible. And it's not, the thing that soured them on WWE is the cost was so high, and AEW would come in at a lower cost. WWE had the advantage that USA was willing to pay so much more than Fox was, because they felt they needed it, and Fox no longer felt that they needed it. Fox's strategy was, we're going to do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday primetime sports. Thursday NFL. Well, they don't have Thursday NFL anymore, so they don't feel that they need the Friday. Although, hell, the Friday they're going to do college football anyway. So that's what they're replacing it with. And maybe, I mean, there'll obviously be some college football games that do better than SmackDown, and there'll be some that won't.
Yeah. And so I guess my why I brought it up is because it doesn't make sense, except when you broke it down from the numbers perspective of why Lachlan Murdoch said that they were not interested in WWE. It was strictly about their return on the investment. They just didn't want to lose money on it.
Yeah, they didn't make money. The key is they believe that their carriage fees would not go down at all losing SmackDown. So it's all a matter of how much ad revenue do we get for this show versus how much we pay. And that was a negative. So it's like, we could do something else better with our time. You know what I mean? Like, perhaps college football will help more in that regard. So that's the mentality there. AEW obviously will not help one bit in that either. But if you can sell ads at a certain rate, that would be lower, most likely. It may be even considerably lower, but the cost is also considerably lower. You could make that, you could look at that and say, we may make, this could be a positive financially for the company. And that's the key. So, but again, I expect, and again, there is no Fox deal. Okay.
Yes.
There's talks. That doesn't mean there's a deal. but if we're going to go with most likely scenario, it's FS1.
Yes.
And FS1 is what it is. It's like, I don't know that we need another show. I think that AEW, they're already overexposed on television as far as like, whatever. I mean, like, it's like, the Wednesday show is usually good. The Saturday show, look at the Saturday lineup that they've got that they taped last night. And it wasn't super intriguing to me. I mean, I'm sure I know, one of our readers went to sent me a very detailed report of what happened. He had a great time, said the matches themselves are great. The crowd reaction was great, even though it was a small crowd.
Yeah, I saw some photos. There was like not a lot of people there.
No, but they're not drawn anywhere. It's big amounts of people. But yeah, but the it's like the idea of really good wrestling matches, match after match, but with people with matches that are not drawing you to the show, or you look them on paper and go, this is a match I can't wait to see. When you don't have that, and it's the B show, the A show is obviously the Wednesday show. Mm-hmm. It's tough. You need to have, I mean, you really don't want shows just churned out there for the sake of having shows. I mean, the one thing WWE does well right now is that there is, Raw and SmackDown both have, are kept strong enough from a star power standpoint, a match standpoint, and who's on the show and everything, to where, that they're, they're I don't want to say must see, but there's more of a must see to them, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And NXT is just completely different. It's all about seeing the stars of the future, and whatever they've done in the last year has clearly worked because, last 18 months, I would say more than a year. Because now we're at the situation where it's not always up week to week, from the year before. Whereas, for most of the time it was way, way, way up, especially with younger viewers, because they were, essentially the way they introduced new characters and the pacing and things like that was something that was a positive. Has been a positive for the company.
Speaking of, I do wonder if there's some addition by subtraction. Like, I do wonder if they keep all of the shows that they do have on Warner. But NXT, what is NXT making on CW?
$34 million.
Like, would that be enough to create another show on on a different channel, you think, even with the same market of AEW being overexposed? Is that worth it to maybe dilute your product even a little bit more?
That's a good question. I can't give you, it's like, that's like borderline, you know what I mean? It's like, I could argue both ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you said 50, I would say absolutely. If you said 20, I would say no.
Right.
34, it's on the borderline. Yeah. I mean, for WWE, it works because, number one, they're taping at their gym. So the costs are not that much. It's also interesting that, the Chicago and the St. Louis advances, and again, it's still a couple weeks away and they may pick up, but the Chicago and St. Louis advances are lower than I would expect for those first two shows, especially the second one is bad. It's 2,000 for St. Louis. And I thought that, Randy Orton's a big name and he's local and everything, but he's not CM Punk in Chicago. Not saying that he's not a bigger star than Punk. No, he's not a bigger star than Punk, actually.
Not right now.
He really isn't. I shouldn't even say that, even though he's been a star for longer. But CM Punk in Chicago is like legit, like a big freaking draw. And, they're between 5 and 6. And I really thought, first show on a new network, and that's a big deal. And you have Punk. And you're going to have lots of they're going to load that thing up with main roster guys. They already are. They stay, look, they may end up with 10, in the next couple of weeks as when Punk gives his pitches and, promos to build it up. But, it's lower than I expected. It's still, are they going to outdraw what AEW does the night before Thanksgiving in that market? Yes, easily. Are they going to outdraw what AEW did, on their pay-per-view in the market this last week? They're in a bigger building. They might. Yeah.
All right. So I was going to ask you about. Oh, I wanted to add one thing to this conversation. Now, obviously, Fox is the rumor. Like nothing has happened as far as I know. But no. I was listening to. I think I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and there was an analyst on who was talking about the ESPN streaming service that is coming out next year.
That's that's basically the network, but just being put on streaming, right?
Right.
Yes.
And this guy said that he thought that ESPN was going to possibly license the Fox Sports stuff for their streaming network, which is pretty interesting. Now, I don't know if wrestling is involved in that, but
that's interesting.
But
that's actually very interesting.
But
but is it Fox or FS1 or both?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming it would be the entire catalog of whatever their live sports programming is.
Okay, so now how does this differentiate from the bundle that they're trying to put together already?
Yeah, that was the question,
and that's been held up in the courts right now. But that's another interesting one. We're going to see so many major changes. You know the
Fubo lawsuit makes you wonder if Venue is even. If they just may drop it. For ESPN, it sounded like Venue was kind of like a little bit of the beta product, so they could get some information for when they want to do their service next year.
But if I'm ESPN and I'm doing it on my own, I don't know that I want to dilute it to work also with other people. But maybe I'm wrong.
Fox is the only one of these big players that does not have a streaming component to their product. They stream to Fox.com, but that's it. So basically, they would just be getting paid for the online distribution of their content that is already on broadcast.
Yeah. I can see that.
Okay, but here's where the interesting piece happens and why. I mean, again, this is all speculation, but TKO, Mark Shapiro, it sounds like they really, really want to still be with ESPN. And if I was them,
for UFC, yes,
for
absolutely.
UFC.
Yeah.
And if I was them too, and it was A, working with ESPN, or B, working with WBD, I'd want to work with ESPN because WBD has made a lot of mistakes of late. That would give me some doubt.
But here's the thing. They could work with both. You know what I mean? Like they could work. I mean, they have, look, there's a lot of shows that UFC does on Saturdays that don't air on ESPN. They're ESPN Plus exclusives.
Yes.
And if you sell those to WBD and that's their Saturday night stuff, but then, they have different stations. I mean, they could still keep Collision on TNT and they could put that on TBS, or they could move Collision to TBS, which is probably the better idea because I think they want TNT to be more the sports channel. But again, that's theoretical, and that's 2026. But you could, like I said, you could also do both and get, more money that way.
Yeah, the point was that would ESPN, would TKO want ESPN to stream an AEW wrestling show on this flagship network where their big product, the UFC, is also on? Would they care? I don't know if they would or not.
There's always going to be head-to-heads in other sports going on. So to me, I don't think that's an issue. If you're going, again, if you have both, it's not, like I said, like, look, TBS and TNT are owned by the same company, and TNT has hockey every Wednesday night, and they have AEW every Wednesday night head to head. That's the nature of having multiple channels and multiple stations, and ESPN even competes with itself with whatever they have on ESPN2 if they've got a major sports event on ESPN2.
So you mentioned in the newsletter that Max is on the table, and you believe that there will be something going on with Max. Do you think pay-per-view?
I think pay-per-view, yes.
So what's interesting about pay-per-view?
But I don't know. And again, it's like, Tony's talked about it. We've talked about it forever.
He put Max over big recently.
He put Max over big. And there's two models. There's the UFC model and there's the WWE
WWE model.
I'm sure that Tony, if he could pick, would pick the WWE model. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's like he has to get those guys to approve. And I don't know. So I don't know where that stands. I don't know what it's going to be.
So Andrew and I were trying to do this math the other day,
mm-hmm.
and I failed spectacularly doing this math live on that show. But I think we figured out that if you had 12 pay-per-views a year and you did 100,000 buys, you could,
you know what? Like they do 9 right now, but if it becomes, just a subscription to Max and it's not a $50 buy, people would be fine with 12. But you also get to the point where you and I are, okay? You know what I mean? It's like how do you live a life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like look, tonight, just perfect example tonight. It's like I'm going out tonight, but I still have to watch SmackDown, and it's a big freaking SmackDown, the first show on USA, loaded show, CMLL anniversary show. You know what I mean? There's going to be, the biggest UFC of the year. There's Collision. I mean, at some, even like one of the things that I've noticed a lot is with the readership of the Observer is how much less people are interested in New Japan and how much less they're interested in TNA, because they're just trying to keep up with WWE and also UFC is another one too. There's way more interest in UFC in the past because you're just so busy trying to keep up with WWE and AEW that you don't got time to follow everything. It's like I have to, but it's real. Like if they were both doing 2 hours of TV a week, I'd be watching all this Japan. And we got an earthquake, by the way. Did you know that? Did you feel it?
No, I didn't. It's happening right now.
Yeah, we just had an earthquake. Yeah. Well, you're not that far from me. I would figure you'd feel it.
I never feel these earthquakes though.
Okay, well, I'm on the second floor, so there you go.
Yeah, no. So here, what was even my question?
You were doing the math on the paper.
Yeah, on the pay-per-view. So, if you were Tony, would you take whatever your consistent revenue is from pay-per-view? And average it out, or would you need a bump because it is going to be much harder for him to continually sell pay-per-views, especially if you dial it up to more than what they have. It's just harder.
It will be harder to maintain the average with 12. Absolutely. So if you're looking at, if you get what you are averaging now, and again, Max is interesting because ESPN, because the thing with ESPN Plus and UFC, and also Peacock with WWE is that they are national services. ESPN Plus is United States, Peacock is United States. So you're still selling your pay-per-views the rest of the world or doing the network essentially. WWE was actually still has the WWE network, which will be shut down at the end of this year because everything goes to Netflix in all those foreign countries. But you still have that for other stuff. And with UFC, they still sell pay-per-views as pay-per-views all over the world. They still, you know what I mean? They didn't sell their international business. Yeah. Now, I know Max is not in every country, but it is in many countries. More than it was.
Yeah.
It's in many countries in Europe. So I don't know how that deal works. Are they going to still, are they still going to do Triller outside the countries that Max does? I mean, they'd have to, I don't remember the list of what, if they cover Australia or whatever. And they do a lot of pay-per-view buys in Europe. Some of the European countries get Max, but some of them don't. So, like if we're going to say that they're doing, let's say on a general basis, 100,000 US, let's just say, okay. For Max, you know what I mean? It's like, it may be equivalent to 110. I don't know. But I mean, but the, it's like, I don't know how the breakdowns are in the different countries that Max is in and not in. But if you're saying if you would go to Tony and go, we will pay you the average of what you were doing for 8 shows last year. And, rise that to 12 because you're going to do 12, let's just say. So increase that by, that's 50%. If I was him, I would say without doing another bump, I think I would say yes. If I was him, yeah, because I think it benefits you. I think one of the things that benefits is that with more people, if more people watch the pay-per-views, which is the best part of AEW is the pay-per-views. If more people watch the pay-per-views, they're going to be more connected to the storylines, and I think it will grow all your business if more people have access to those big shows. So yeah, for the same number, prorated up, yes. I don't know that I would want a premium. The one thing that where the benefit, this is the whole thing with the ESPN Plus and why they benefit so much from UFC pay-per-views, is that they basically paid UFC for the 50% that they were getting on average, but the other 50% that the cable companies were getting, now ESPN gets that.
Yeah.
So it's that 50%. Now, WBD was getting some of that for people who ordered on Bleacher Report, but there were people who order on many other services besides Bleacher Report, including television. So they weren't getting the same amount of money. So if they go with an exclusive thing, and of course, WWE is not exclusive on Peacock because they're still on regular pay-per-view, although it's, it's not a big money thing in the United States, but it's there. But if they get an exclusive, then in theory, the people who buy television pay-per-view, or they buy pay-per-view on Triller, or they buy pay-per-view on YouTube.com or whatever, the various different ways, all that money, that other 50% would all go to WBD if they had the exclusive. So therefore, that's where their revenue goes up. Plus, they get the 50% that AEW was getting, but they also pay for it, so to speak. So that's where for WBD, it becomes, on paper, a good financial deal.
So if you remember when they created the sports tier on Max through the Bleacher Report tab,
right. Mm-hmm.
They originally were giving you sort of like a sneak preview, and they weren't charging people. But the idea was, I think, to do like a $10 upcharge for whenever they were going to make that happen. And it never happened. There's still no charge.
Weren't they going to do that like in March for March Madness?
They were trying.
That was the original date, and they still haven't done it. Yeah.
And so, which tells you that there probably wasn't a whole lot of people watching. So I just read, I believe it was Lucas Shaw from Bloomberg a couple weeks ago. He reported that is back on the table, and they are trying to figure out when the timing is to do that again. So if AEW was to be on the sports tier or whatever, if they decided to put all of those pay-per-views in that sports tier and then they added that surcharge, I think the lowest subscription price would be like $17.99, and then the highest price would be $31, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So that they're it's not like you can just get, if they did that, it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm just going to get the cheapest version of Max so I can watch my AEW pay-per-views. Right. There's probably going to be some added cost in there.
So it's going to, in that sense, it's in the middle between the $80 that extra a month that it costs to buy all these UFCs, and with WWE, which is what, like $8, I think it's $7.99, which is a bargain of all bargains. You know what I mean? Especially because
maybe
WWE
they would.
Good.
I'm assuming they would put it on the sports tier. I think it would be attractive on the sports tier.
I would think they would put it on the sports tier because they're looking for subscribers to the sports tier, and this is a way to get new subscribers to the sports tier, especially if you're putting the pay-per-views on once a month. Yes.
Yeah, it would make a whole lot of sense to me if they did that.
Yeah.
All right. So they AEW on Dynamite, they changed the main event for the Grand Slam show from Darby and Danielson to Darby and Moxley, and I'm assuming Danielson and Nigel. Was that more of just a creative thing, or was that for business reasons? Is it because of the ticket sales?
I don't know the answer. I haven't discussed that with anyone. So I actually, I don't know. I suppose I could ask. My gut is that the hottest thing that they have right now, like it's a weird thing because the Tacoma pay-per-view was going to be Danielson and Darby, and it still could be if Darby beats Moxley. But to me, it's like Danielson versus Darby or Danielson versus Moxley right now. Danielson versus Moxley to me is so much stronger of a match, and absolutely the no-brainer match that you should be doing. but Darby was also supposed to be the next champion. So are they going to pivot? And again, right now, if should this Moxley be the next champion, beating Danielson? Well, so much depends on Danielson in the sense of Danielson. Again, I mean, he's going to be gone once he loses this title. So as long as he wants to stay, I mean, it's not infinite. He ain't going to stay infinite. But I mean, I don't see rushing it off him if you don't have to. So it's intriguing because we know that when the thing with Danielson is we know that when he loses the title, like it's not like it's not going to be his last match. I don't know that he'll ever have a last match, but we're not going to see him much afterwards. And so that's a big deal, like his title loss. And in some ways, I mean, you could go like, do you want that to be him and Darby, the passing of the torch, hugging and all that? Or do you want it to be put all this heat on Jon Moxley as a heel? And he's the one who eliminated Bryan Danielson. And I don't know, you could argue both ways. I feel Moxley's the stronger one right now, but I mean, there's, that's just my thoughts.
What I found interesting is Darby Allin is young. He is somebody who is closer to his prime than being far away from his prime.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would age-wise, I would say that, but you got to remember that like Darby could break down at any moment.
Yeah. That's actually what I was getting at. Partially is that he's got a smaller window. You would think
it's not like it's Jack Perry where I would be very confident he's going to be around in 10 years, right? At a high level. And on the flip side, you are taking him out of that match, and who he is being replaced by someone who's as old as I am. And I do understand there is an audience of ROH fans who really, really desperately, really, really want to see that match. And the Nigel match. Yeah, and I'm fine. It's TV. That doesn't like. I don't think that's like a giant thing either way. It's like, Nigel's been talking about it for a year. I figure why not do the match? Give him his match. Give him his retirement match. It's a nice thing. I mean, Darby, like you can do Darby and Danielson anytime you want. You're going to do Danielson and Nigel probably once, and then Nigel's never going to wrestle again. So, and Danielson's on borrowed time. So to me, it's like if you got the time and to put the Nigel match in, I would just do it.
Okay, so my point or my question, the Nigel match was seemingly being built up, and it was kind of like this really slow build. I don't imagine that the All-In match was supposed to be his comeback match. I imagine that it was always supposed to be the Danielson match, but then he was in the All-In match, which was great because he got a great response.
Mm-hmm. And that's what picked up all the interest in this match. Because I mean, there was always some interest, but I think that when they saw Nigel and he performed well,
it was good.
It became something like, again, like not everyone was an ROH fan, and not everyone knows the history between the two, but he's been talking for so long, and he's in shape, and he probably can go for one match. So I think that there's interest in it. It's hard because it's, again, AEW's still in a tough place. I mean, it's like financially, I think that they're looking kind of good right now, but I mean, they still have those other problems. I mean, it's not like, look, they were never going out of business. I don't think. I mean, I suppose if they'd gotten if nobody wanted them on television, you would have to. But I never really saw a great possibility of them going out of business or anything like that. But you want them. I mean, you want them to be hotter. You want them to be not perceived as this company. I mean, in the where they don't draw any fans, or they're I mean, which is it's that AWA perception at the end. You know what I mean? And AWA didn't have the talent these guys have, but I mean, at the end when AEW was starting to draw those AWA was starting those really bad crowds in the Midwest after being dominant, and WF would come in, and everything changed. Of course,
they put Mean Gene in the ring to draw some people.
Yeah, that's when that's when it was still competitive.
Yeah,
once it stopped being competitive, they didn't do that as much.
Okay, so is the reason that they're here's my question: is the reason why they're doing the Nigel match now because I've not seen Danielson talk about him one time. It's only been the other side. Yeah. Is it a little bit of a booking tell that maybe the Danielson full-time thing is going to end sooner than we realize? Because I would have expected if they were building to this match, there would have been way more back and forth, and there hasn't. It just kind of was just thrust upon us at the last minute here.
Well, I don't know that this was a long-term plan. I think that this is probably something that my gut of everything is that all this stuff changed in the last month. So
yes, that's what it feels like for sure.
That's what it feels like. I don't know that for sure. I'll try to ask around, but yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But Danielson had talked about Nigel many times, but it had always been prompted. But he still gave storyline answers.
You're talking about in press conferences.
In press conferences.
I'm talking about on television.
On television, nothing. Right, nothing on television. Yeah.
And so what
but they do like, a lot. They do a lot of their stuff off television, which may be a mistake, but they do that though.
But I guess the thing is, I just wonder if, because I was picturing like this really long. Not long, but I would say several month title run where Danielson's having these matches and these 2 counts are like making the crowd go crazy because they think it could be it. And I wanted to see like maybe 4 or 5 title matches. But if this was kind of thrust upon us because of the fact that maybe Danielson's not going to be around that long.
The thing with this one though is it's not a title match.
I know, it's kind of weird.
I get the idea of protecting the sanctity of a title match, and this guy's a retired announcer, and he didn't earn a title match. So I understand that, and a lot of people would argue that. I think the counter is you're in New York. When you're in New York or Los Angeles, I feel that you have to have title matches. You know what I mean? It's like New Yorkers and even more than people in Los Angeles, New Yorkers think that they're special. And because of that, you have to treat them like they are. And you can't go into New York with your normal run-of-the-mill show. So I think that because it's New York and it's Arthur Ashe Stadium, it's Grand Slam, that even though from a sports standpoint, which is very overused in wrestling and not really applicable, you could say he didn't earn a title match. I just think it should be a title match.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
All right. What about the rating? What did you think about the rating?
It was a rating. They're going against the VMAs.
Audience came back a little bit. Overall audience.
Yeah, and they were up a little from last week. They were second in the time slot to the VMAs, and they almost beat them. Of course, that's a weird one because the VMAs were on 13 different channels. I'm not exaggerating. They were on 13 different channels and a million streaming services. So the biggest of all was the MTV audience, and MTV. Well, MTV they did do a great younger demo. Audience wise, they were right. 0.33. Yeah. The total audience wise is the funny thing is that they were actually very, very close. But in the demo, the VMAs were like way higher. Look at who they had on. It's funny because people are going like, oh, how come they didn't go down from last year like AEW did? And it's like, look who they had on. You know what I mean?
You mean Taylor Swift?
Of course I mean Taylor Swift.
Because that's not the draw for me. If I would have known beforehand that LL Cool J, who is over 50 right now, was performing because he has a new album out, then I would have tuned in. I didn't know. They didn't say anything. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But then I was like, oh, and Taylor was on that show too.
Yeah. But as far as it's a number, it's fine. I think it's going to be interesting because next week, of course, they're not going head to head or anything, but next week, Punk is on NXT, and he's a big draw. And that first show on CW is very intriguing, but it also means nothing in a sense of like, again, like people going like, oh my God, how could they expect 1 million? Maybe they won't get 1 million. Who knows? It's all experimental and it doesn't matter. But the point is like that first number with Punk and Miz and God knows who else is going to be on there. And there will be others. And I know Belair and Cargill, I think, said they were going to be on there, and there's going to be more than that. Okay. That's not going to be a representative number. I mean, it's a number. No. I mean, I expect that show will do much better than any other show they probably ever put on CW. But it's like, and probably, beat what AEW does the next day. I mean, I would strongly expect that. But, as far as like where they wind up on CW is a really interesting question because, I mean,
what is CW's network average or primetime average, I guess?
I could look it up. It's not particularly high. But if you take away wrestling from USA, okay, if you take the wrestling out of USA, because remember I looked this up, take the wrestling out of USA and then you compare it to CW, they're not that far apart. Now, if you look at just the USA average for the year and the CW average for the year, USA is way, way, way ahead. So it appears that USA is a much stronger channel and they're moving from a stronger channel to a weaker channel. The number of homes is barely different. It's 67, 68 million. The numbers in the Observer, 67, 68 million for USA, and it's just over 71 million for CW. So even though it's a network, which you would think would be in way, way, way more homes, it's really not. So, just based on that, the homes alone and everything and the power of the station, the numbers should be similar, if not lower on CW because CW, wrestling fans are so used to USA. But, if you want to see a show, you're going to find the show after the second or third week. So the numbers probably should be somewhat similar on the two channels. Maybe it will go down though. It's hard to say, but I know that
NXT is going to be the dandy of this network. I'm looking at some numbers and these numbers are really, really low.
NXT will be the highest rated show on the network for sure. Yeah. Yeah. But what does that mean? Yeah.
Maybe the
remain the price. Almost everybody bought like in the first week. So if it was 1,700, I'd go, okay, we're going to end up at 2,500. That's the shits. They may end up at 4. Mm-hmm. Still, what we said originally, it's like it should have been in San Jose State.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no argument there.
It would have felt hot at San Jose State. That was perfect.
It'd been packed. It'd been packed.
And they would have sold. The ticket would have been hotter just because there would have been less of them available.
Yeah. But I mean, if they'd done the Civic, they'd have sold out first day.
Yeah. I don't know about that building for TV though.
Yeah, I don't either. Because it's so antiquated. But it's I don't know. There's something about it. You know that the San Jose Civic might be the oldest building in the world that has regularly had pro wrestling, that still has pro wrestling. Because that building had pro wrestling. We've dated it back to the 30s. And like, yeah, you could go Madison Square Garden, but there's Madison Square Garden, there's new Madison Square Gardens. I mean, this is the same Civic. And I mean, granted, some of the chairs are not 100 years old, and they've renovated it a couple of times. But when I go in there, I mean, I first was going in there in the early 70s. When I go in there, it is the same exact building to me, like the Cow Palace, that it was when I was a kid. So it's one of the, but yeah, it's, I mean, there may be someone somewhere. But I could, I couldn't come up with one building that has regularly had pro wrestling, still has pro wrestling, that's had it as long as the Civic.
I've seen a basketball game there within the last 20 years.
Well, of course, I saw tons because before,
yeah, a long time ago, but not in the last 20 years.
Yeah, when I went to college, that's where they played until they got the new arena.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was I've seen so many sports in there. It'd be crazy. Volleyball, roller derby, which isn't a sport, but indoor soccer. Man, I've seen a million sports in that building.
So
not million is very exaggerated. It's probably closer to 10.
SmackDown on USA will happen by the time most people are listening to this. Do you expect any changes, or do you expect like literally the same show that they've been doing on Fox for the last many years?
Well, they're gonna load it up for the first couple of weeks, which they have to do, to get, because but I mean, and in the end, yes, I don't expect any major changes to that. Raw as noted in the Observer, Raw is actually going to have significant changes when it moves to Netflix. And the key one is that there's no hard out. Like they can go as long as they feel necessary. They're not in a rush that they've got to get off by 11. I got the impression, that again, I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours. I don't know if it's going to be 3 hours. I don't know if it's going to be 2.5 hours, and it might vary. I was basically told that there's no actual final decision. I was first told that it's going to be the 3-hour show, and then I was told, there's no final decision. And then it's like, but it can vary anyway because, it's not like we got to get off the air because there's another show starting.
Yeah,
we can go as long as we want to go. And the thing that's like the positive of that, and it is a positive, is that when that main event starts at 9:47 on a 2-hour show that starts in a couple weeks on USA, we know that the main event's going 10, 11 minutes. We know this, right? If it starts at 9:47 on Netflix, they can go 40 minutes if they want to, and that I know that they think that that's kind of cool. You cannot predict when it will end. Kind of like with AEW when they're doing a lot of overruns. I mean, they're not going to go 15 minutes over. But, you also know that it doesn't necessarily have to end at 10 o'clock, which I think is a good thing. But, for whatever reason, that I think it's a good thing. I'm not going to even discuss anything else on that because it's a silly discussion.
I just wish that Hulu did a better job at getting it all, because sometimes it gets it. And then I think, oh, they're in communication. They figured it out. And then the next time it doesn't get it. And I'm like, oh, bummer. Now I got to go to YouTube.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. There was a tweet from Sean Ross Sapp today. I don't know if you're going to have it in your update. I imagine that you will.
I've already done the update, so I won't.
Oh, well, AEW is doing a 2 out of 3 falls match at before the Jacksonville Jaguars game on Sunday.
Really? With who?
It is Hologram and Sammy Guevara and the Beast Mortos and Matt Taven. I don't know what the steps are. I'm assuming we're going to figure out this weekend why this match is happening.
What a weird match. I mean, that's cool. I think that's great. I think that's great for AEW that, take advantage of the fact that, you're going to have however many people in there watching your product. And the Beast Mortos is really like a cool person to have there just because he'll make Hologram shine and people will be really intrigued by that. And Sammy, Sammy's a big risk taker. So, again, for like a casual non-fan who doesn't watch TV, they might be really impressed. I mean, it's cool. That's a cool thing.
I think if there are kids at the game, I think it'll be really cool for them. My worry is that I don't know how many football. I mean, you've been to a lot of football games in your life, but going to an NFL game, if I am there an hour and a half before the game starts, that's when I'm getting my food. That's when I'm going to the merch store. So I do wonder how many people will actually be in.
Yeah, it's not like it's going to be 60,000 people watching.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But still, even if it's 15, there's nothing wrong with doing it, and you get a little bit of publicity if like some of the NFL writers see it or people. You know what I mean?
I also imagine that means AEW wrestlers will be at the game and possibly hanging out and maybe even, be on the sidelines or something.
AEW wrestlers are at a lot of Jaguars home games anyway, the ones in the area, because Tony always, lets them come.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, that's a smart cross promotional thing for sure. Yeah.
Saban and Shelley, you wrote that they are more than likely headed to NXT.
I mean, I've expected that for months, but it's It's happening.
What do you think is?
I mean, I don't say
their reasoning for picking NXT over AEW. I'm assuming they would have been on AEW's radar too.
I'm sure that it comes down to two things. Number one is who makes, especially at their age, because they're early 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got a lot of mileage on their body. I think number one for both of them is who made the better offer, and that would probably be, if they're going to NXT, that's probably them. If it's close, then the second question is who sold us better on the idea of what they're going to do with us. And the thing is, like, if they were going to the main roster WWE, it would be tough because there's so many guys there, and they got DIY, which would be a similar type team, and this and that. I mean, they're great. The guys are great. They're going to give you good stuff. With AEW, it's funny because when they first came out, it was kind of like AEW has so many guys, and they don't need new guys that are good workers. They need young guys, and they need to, you know what I mean? Like they need young guys and top guys, so to speak. NXT, those guys actually are as funny as it is, because remember before NXT used to be developmental and they didn't want anyone like this under Vince. Now they're pivoting back to the other designation of NXT, the original Levesque thing, when he, now they're going for ratings and stuff again. But I think they fit in better with NXT right now. But I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it's like every one of these guys, from Okada to, whoever, it's who gives you the better offer and who wants you more. And wherever they end up, which looks very strongly to be WWE right now, they probably made the better offer. That's all. But I mean, I'm sure if AEW had made a great offer to him, they'd have gone. But again, I think Tony's got to be selective on who he makes the great offers to. And at the time, he had just spent all that money on new talent. The funny thing is, like right now, but Tony just signed Grizzled Young Veterans, and it's like they're not the same, but it's like the choice. So it's like I don't think this is like there's certain people where it's like, oh my God, somebody lost out on something. I think that like I don't say like AEW lost out on not having them, but it would be cool to have them, especially if they're gonna have more TVs. But you have to be able to make them stars. Whereas in NXT, like the standard, I guess, is what I'm talking about, is like if you were any kind of a name, that NXT crowd will pop big for you. Whereas the AEW crowd, of course, they would react to them at first, but then they would probably get lost in the shuffle. And with all that talent there, whatever, I mean, WWE made the best play, and good luck to them. They've been around for a long, long, long time. They've never made giant money in wrestling. And, I hope that they can make very good incomes the next however many years they're in there.
What are your thoughts on Tessitore after a couple weeks?
He's good. I mean,
you like him?
For the level of experience, he's good. Yeah. I would give him a thumbs up considering he's never done it before. He clearly likes it. You can tell the difference. I mean, he's got an affinity towards it. It's not like, I think every announcer they brought in has kind of liked it, but they haven't really understood it, and they haven't really understood how to announce it. And I think that he instinctively is pretty close on that already. So I think he's going to be fine. Yeah. I'm a thumbs up on him.
You mentioned the CMLL anniversary show as something you need to watch tonight.
I'm very interested in. It's weird because it's like I'm more interested in it as an event than any of the matches, because it's like I see these matches every Friday, and not every week, but most weeks there's it's super wrestling with great heat, over and over again. It's awesome. CML right now has so many elements. It's got the fan passion reaction of my childhood, the feel of wrestling in my childhood, although the moves are completely different and the style is completely different. With the modern style, with very, very entertaining guys. The main event's the main event. This, you know what I mean? It's like the opening match is the opening match. You know what I mean? It's like you don't get a 4-star opening match. You know what I mean? You build the card, and then your last couple of matches, which was what everyone pays for, they're generally off the charts, and it's week to week booking. So you have your storylines. So it's to me, it's a very, I don't get to watch as much as I want of it, but it's actually, one of the most enjoyable products for me to watch. But as far as tonight's more about the guest stars. You know what I mean? It's like, how's Orange Cassidy going to do in CMLL? I mean, he's done, the Chikara stuff, so he knows how to work with these guys. How's Willow going to do in a singles match? And how big are they going to get over? And, Jericho and Mystico it's a very unique, big match, as far as, legendary guys that have never done a match before. And how will they react and things like that. Obviously the 4-way mask match is there's something about an anniversary show mask match. It's like there's nothing else like it. There just is. There's nothing else like it. And hopefully this will live up to it, but it's going to be tough because the standard, when I think of, so many of these anniversary mask matches over the years, that just been, Atlantis and Beyond 03, my God, or Ryo and Cien Caras. I think that was an anniversary. I'm almost positive. Obviously Blue Panther and Beyond 05, which I've been writing about. Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero, which I still to this day kick myself that I didn't go to because I would have known, or Sombra and Volador, even though they got booed out of the building, they did a freaking incredible match. But there's so much of that it can be special. The guys, those guys are going to turn it up. They've been feuding for months, week after week. It's like, this is like old school stuff. Every week there's a low blow, there's cheating, there's this, there's that. And now it's someone's getting their mask off. So, I'm into the idea of the show. I don't know it's going to be a better show than last Friday that was like the lowest crowd that they've drawn in a while, but that show was awesome. I don't know that it'll be a better wrestling show, but the atmosphere will be there. It's a packed house. If I didn't go to London, I'd have gone to this one for sure. 100%. But I went
to London next year.
What?
You don't have to go to London next year.
Hopefully they have a good show. I'll go to Arena Mexico sometime in the next year. I really will.
UFC
for 15 years.
Yeah, no, UFC 306. You wrote that they have 34 corporate sponsors for this event.
Mm-hmm.
This event is gigantic.
It's gigantic. Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny because it's like, I think everybody that is buying it or paying attention to it, when they buy the pay-per-view, they're going to look at the visual special effects. And it's like, if they're not incredibly impressive on television, it's going to be a disappointment no matter what the fights are. This is not about the fights, even though I think the main event's a great fight, because it can go either way. But, it's a 3-match show. Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez is like, that's a sleeper match. Diego Lopez looked so great in his last fight, and Brian Ortega is a very exciting fighter. So that could be good. But the rest of it, it's like, it's fights. It's fights that you can have on a regular Saturday. O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili is a very strong, very good main event. Striker, O'Malley versus Grappler, Merab. Whoever imposes their will on the other will likely win the fight. It could end at any moment by a submission. It could end at any moment by a knockout. So it's intriguing. And, Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko, obviously that one could go either way. Grasso did win the first one. The second one was a draw. I think Shevchenko's still the better fighter, but she's, getting a little up there in years. But, Grasso can beat her because she's shown that she could. And she'll probably be the crowd favorite because it's still, it's a Mexican-oriented show because of the weekend. I'm surprised no Brandon Moreno on the show, because he's like the big superstar to the Mexicans, but he's not.
Canelo's also fighting.
I know.
I don't know if this is just me being a little bit out of the boxing loop, but I've definitely heard more about the UFC show than I have about the Canelo fight.
Me too. I've had people ask like what I thought things going to do more on pay-per-view. And the funny thing is we're never going to know because we never get the UFC numbers anymore.
Yeah.
Canelo number will be interesting. There hasn't been a lot of big, most of the boxing pay-per-views are those gimmick shows and they're dead. I mean, did you see the Diaz number and the Jake Paul number in the Observer?
Yes.
I mean, it's stunningly bad, but Canelo's numbers are always good. And I think Tank Davis's last fight was very good. But most
Canelo fight is $90, by the way,
on pay-per-view
through DAZN, and they're doing if you buy the fight, then you get like 7 days of DAZN free. I don't know if that matters to anybody. I don't know what they have on next week. That would be interesting.
It's not like he's fighting anybody. You know what I mean? It's you know what I'm saying? It's like if he was fighting somebody gigantic, yes, you could get that. We've already proven that. But just the idea of Canelo fighting at this stage of his career, I don't know how big that is anymore. I guess he stood. By the way, did you see the Mike Coppinger's article on the 15 biggest, most important people in wrestling, boxing, and MMA?
I didn't see it, but I saw you going back and forth with people on it. I didn't see what the list was though.
Yeah. It's look, no one's ever going to be happy with the list. He even contacted me about it, but because I said, well, Ari Emanuel should be there, and he said, when he'd done the list, at times he had him on, and then he just kind of thought, well, it's too inside, and whatever. It's like, who is more important, Dana White or Nick Khan? And you know what? I mean, he had Dana ahead of Nick, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like if you put a gun to my head, you got to choose like who's more important to their product. I would say Dana, wouldn't you? Of the two,
I would say Dana, but I also think he's a little detrimental to the product at the same time, because of how outspoken he is about certain things. Yeah,
the Trump thing,
of course.
The Trump thing's it's divisive. Yeah, like Nick's never going to go on there and run down Kamala Harris. He ain't going to do it. You know what I mean? And Dana might, and kind of has in a way. So yeah. But yeah, I guess if that. But it's an interesting list. Whatever. I mean, the only one that I had a qualm with was like the high ranking of the Paul brothers, only because it's like if this was like a couple of years ago, I would say yes. But it's like Jake's dead on pay-per-view. I mean, it's like he just is. And Logan, he does pro wrestling and everything, but it's not like he's the biggest star in pro wrestling. You know what I mean? Yeah, he's got a lot of Instagram followers and stuff, but that's not for pro wrestling. It's like he's not the biggest draw in WWE. You know what I mean? Punk's a bigger draw. Cody's a bigger draw. Roman Reigns is a bigger draw. Dwayne, who was very high in the list, like I think he was like number 5 or something. Dwayne's a bigger draw. But Punk and Roman were not on the list. And Cody wasn't on the list either for the top 15. So it's like if they're not on, is Logan really on that list because his energy drink's a sponsor, because he's got a lot of Instagram followers? Is he really a more important player in this game? No, I don't think so. You could debate it though, I suppose. You
were talking about, and this is related to the boxing pay-per-view thing. You were talking about how the guy, the Saudi Arabia guy, wants to lower
Turkey, he was number 1 by the way.
Turkey
was number 1. And you know what? Yeah, that's a boxing centric list at that point, right? Because in boxing, he's clearly number 1.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has, he has an influence on wrestling because WWE does those shows there. He has an influence on UFC because UFC is going to do some shows there. But, you know what? He probably will in the long run be more important than Dana, but I'm not. Yeah, you can make the case. I don't know that he's more important than Dana, but boxing, it's like he is the number 1 guy in boxing now. I mean, easily because of what they're willing to do, and he's changed. Look, the whole mentality of sports promotion has changed because of him. Because it used to be, like, we put on a fight and we got to make money by selling the pay-per-view, and now it's just like this guy's going to spend all kinds of money for whatever he wants. It's an endless supply of money. You can't fight it because nobody. I mean, like just as an example, like Vince McMahon or the Khans. I mean, these are rich people, far richer than people who were ever in wrestling or ever in MMA or, Fertitas, right? These are like rich people, but they still they can't go in there and spend $100 million for Tyson Fury. You know what I mean? It's like they can't afford that. I suppose they could do it. They could do it, but they wouldn't do it. And it's like this guy, he can just do that. And, it's like they don't have to, they're not even concerned with making money on the show. It's like they paid Francis Ngannou to do no pay-per-view buys against Joshua. And it's and it didn't matter. It's somebody else would just go, we can never do this again. This is a loser. It's like there's no losers. They just have no supply of money. So it's totally changed. And, and the guys who are in bed with him have such a big, look at the advantage WWE has over AEW. They get those $100 million from him, 110 million, whatever it's going to be this year. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, the thing I was going to say is you mentioned the low pay-per-view prices and how, Oscar De La Hoya and Eddie Hearn and Bob Arum and these guys, their entire business is really dependent on having these fighters who will be marketable in these high dollar fights.
They're in trouble. Those promoters are in trouble because of Turkey, because they have to make money, and they're going to be, they're the Verne Gagnes and the Bob Geigels. I mean, I don't know that people know that, but they are.
Okay, so this Netflix fight with Tyson and Jake Paul, if this fight does really good business, I'm not saying, I don't think Netflix is going to get into the boxing game necessarily, but if they wanted to,
they could.
They would really be the death knell of that stuff, of the
pay-per-view industry.
Yeah, yeah.
But the pay-per-view industry, as far as television pay-per-view industry, it's pretty dead. You know what I mean? It's like a couple of Canelo fights and another boxing fight, and then some AEWs, and there's nothing else that really draws.
Yeah,
and AEW is again, I mean, by next year they may be out of it too. I think that industry is one that's it's going to be. I think its year is just about up.
All right, let's get to some questions here. Trust the process. Super Chat says, despite big signings, improved booking, and their best in-ring ever, AEW tickets see no increase. What do you make of the lack of correlation? TV ratings as well. What do you make of the lack of correlation? Is a turnaround just not coming, and is this the new normal?
It's a new normal, and I don't know that it's going to change. I think that the basic gist is that they're not number one. I mean, you don't have to be number one, but you have to be fighting for number one. They're not fighting for number one. Look, that Friday, and granted, they were on the Unfamiliar Night and all that last Friday, but I mean, I thought it would be 8-1, and it ended up with I think it was even but they only did an 0.04, right? I mean, it was. It's not their normal night and all that, and I didn't, but I mean,
they'd also. I know a lot of people think that show was built to. What's the term that people were using about the? I watched the show and I was like,
I thought it was a good show, but it doesn't.
Show was fun, but the main event didn't have any stakes whatsoever. If you had built stakes in that match and made it important, then maybe. But I watched it.
It wouldn't make a difference.
But I watched it and I thought, they don't really care about what rating that they do on this show.
They care, but it was out of their control. They're going head to head. But I mean, the whole point of all this is that there's only so many hours and they're not number one.
Okay, but at least Cody Rhodes was on SmackDown. SmackDown was facing the same thing. And at least you had your top star in the middle of the ring cutting a promo to start the show. And I don't even remember what was the beginning segment on Collision.
It was, didn't they put Mark Briscoe and Lance Archer in the ring for a match?
I think that was maybe. Yeah, but the fact that I don't even remember tells you something. But I was just watching going I know SmackDown is not also giving their best effort. They're just doing their show. But like AEW has a pay-per-view the next day, so seemingly you want more people to watch, or you want people to watch as many as you can get to sell the pay-per-view.
You want to be using that show to sell the pay-per-view the next day, of course. Yeah. But I mean, look, there's no sign of a turnaround. I think it's going to continually fall off. And the good part of it is that even though it's going to continually fall off, they can be a profitable, very distant number 2 company that provides us with great pay-per-view shows and good television, week in and week out. But it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be the commercial success that, it's going to, or do the numbers that it used to do. I just don't see it. I mean, of the 3 big signings that we're talking about, Mercedes, what we learned with Mercedes is that her WWE fan base, whatever it was, is either a WWE fan base that's contingent on WWE, they didn't follow her, or it really was just a WWE fan base that liked her, and when you're gone, you're gone. And which is the nature of a lot today. Okada was never going to be a draw on his own as a television draw. I mean, as far as do people pop for him? Yeah, they pop for him really big, but he was never going to be a television ratings draw. He never was. He doesn't, it's just whatever. And Will is someone who, in theory, you build, and in time, and I mean, with Will Ospreay, the one thing is he is very, very popular in the buildings, and he comes across as arguably the biggest star, but certainly one of the 2 or 3 biggest stars in the company. And if you've got a company that's, driving that amount of revenue, and he sells merch and everything like that, then, he's a good signing. He's probably, worth it in a lot of ways. Because you have to have some good people, especially for what they're trying to do, which is be the alternative with the better matches. Well, trying to be the alternative with the better matches. I mean, at least Okada's kind of there, and Will is there all the way. So there is that as a positive, but the idea of they're not Punk, it wasn't, and they weren't going to be. I mean, can Will Ospreay in 5 years be that if the right thing happens and he's in the right spotlight? I mean, it's hard in AEW to do that, but if somehow something happens in AEW and it clicks and they get popular, Will Ospreay will be along for that ride, and he'll be someone really, really big. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, overall, there's no sign of a turnaround. They spend a lot of money on talent, but if they're a profitable business, then I'm not, and it's key talent that's over as much as over is. It is what it is. I mean, Mercedes, I guess in some ways you'd have to say has been a disappointment, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid thing, and everyone talks about it, in the sense of they've got 3 big free agents and their numbers declined. Yeah. They didn't sell more tickets with them, and that's true. They didn't, for a lot of different reasons.
All right. Thomas had a question, and this is going back a couple of weeks. You had written about Mark Henry's criticism of AEW, and the main criticism was that people in AEW just kind of go with what Tony Khan wants to do. Like, they might have their own ideas, but basically what Tony wants is what's going to happen, and they don't speak up because they don't want to, ruffle any feathers or whatever.
That's the same thing as with Vince,
right? And so that was his question.
So in that sense, okay. So in that sense, I mean, he's there. He sees it. It's his perception. I'm not going to argue the perception, because it is. Tony does what Tony wants to do. That's true. But that is, I guess the idea is Mark, so he's the same as Vince, right?
Right.
And that's it. Yeah, he's the same as Vince. Nobody would ever, the funny part is that I don't say nobody would ever say that about Vince, but not too many would. But it's the exact same thing. Yeah. I mean, at least with it's exactly like Vince. Is that good? When he's right, it's good, and when he's not right, it's not as good.
I mean, I'm sure for those couple of years, when he was right and he was pushing the right buttons, that they were awesome. They were doing well. I mean, he came on our show and to talk about the awards, and he got like almost all of them, right? You remember that show? And then
that's when they were the real hot thing. Yeah, and they'll still get some this year, I presume.
But I guess
they won't dominate them, but they'll get some.
What I like about that, not saying that he shouldn't listen to people or that he's not listening to people or that he can't collaborate, but what I like
I think Tony, honestly, I think that Tony has too much stuff going on between the football and the soccer.
But he's always had it, right? Even through the good times.
He did have it through the good times, yeah. But he didn't have as many TV shows to do.
Right. That is the one thing that has changed.
The best time was when he had 3 hours, not 5. And there's a big difference, especially with the Collision. I think the Collision should be stronger, marquee value wise. And he still has the thing of, which I think really hurts, is this idea that and I think that the guys got so used to doing one show a week that he doesn't ask a lot of guys to do 2 shows a week. And you don't have to wrestle on both shows, but you could just be there and do promos and everything. And, it's like the Collision really is a B show. Mm-hmm. And that's like you can't, to me, it's like, I guess inherently when you have a bunch of shows, one of them is going to be a B show, but I just think Collision should be stronger. When I look at the lineup, and it's not, I still have that mentality that like, look, where, you have to have your angles and everything like that. But I just feel that it should be like, the promoter that did the weekly live show. And yeah, they did angles and they did promos, the ones who taped TV at the live show. They did all that at the live show. Okay. But I mean, they had to do a main event and maybe a semi-main event, but it's particularly a main event that will draw each and every week. And when they did the right main event, they made money. And when they did the wrong main event, they made less money or they lost money. And that's how they learned. They learned by trial and error. And the ones who didn't learn, they're gone because you're making too many errors and you can't stay in business. The ones who learned the most made less errors and they stayed in business for decades and decades and made all kinds of money. I look at the Wednesday show and the Saturday show, and maybe this is unfair, but I look with the mentality of like, what's the main event and put it on last. And so people don't tune out during the show and everything like this, and build that main event with your top people. And then your pay-per-view is like, to do a Mid-South wrestling analogy. That's the Superdome 4 times a year. Okay. Or 5 times a year, or whatever it is. But the other one is your weekly show in New Orleans every week when they're doing business. And it's always Junkyard Dog in the main event, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest match, of course, is going to be the pay-per-view match when you got the real angle. And when you turn the guy on JYD, the big match is going to be the Superdome, and then you follow it up. So whoever the guy is, whether it's Will Ospreay, whether it's Max, whether it's Strickland, whether it's Danielson, it's like the point of this is that they're wrestling in the main event every single week because they're the main event. And we don't have that in AEW. We don't really have it in WWE, but WWE can get away with a lot less right now because they're super hot. And the fact is that we still have tons of big stars. Like if you look at the star power on Collision tomorrow night, and you look at the star power on SmackDown tonight, it's not comparable. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be, and I think that's the thing is that, I mean, I saw somebody sent me an ad for Dayton last night. They taped Collision last night, and it's all these faces in the ad, top guys, and none of them are on the show. And it's like, that's like a bad thing when you're advertising people who aren't on the show. And I mean, it should be incumbent. It's not like these guys are working 300 dates a year where you can't bring them to Dayton, even if it's just to work a dark match. You know what I mean? Which they don't do, which we've all suggested. Go into these cities, advertise, have a big special dark match with the top guys against each other. Go in there and do a 12, 15-minute match with a championship at stake. You're not going to change the title. Maybe someday you change the title just to be on, make them honest. But they don't do any of that. It's like they still do what they're doing. They don't change. And what can I say? It's like the advances are and the sales are what they are. It's like there's no. That's not going to change unless unless things change. And they're not in the position. Like, look, they just did a great angle, one of the best angles they've done. And, are these advances picking up to see Swerve and Hangman? Oh, they don't even know if Swerve and Hangman are going to be wrestling on the show anymore. You know what I mean? When they are or anything. I mean, they got this big show in New York, and, Swerve's probably not on the show. And if Hangman's got a match, I don't know about it yet, so there you go.
Jarrett, he's going to be facing Jarrett at some point.
Looks like he's going to face Jarrett, but that's not it. You know what I mean? That's fine for a television match.
Yeah, for a television match, I think it's a good match.
It's fine. I mean, but I don't even know. Look, I should know who Hangman's wrestling at the next pay-per-view. It should be obvious right in my face. And I don't know who that is.
All right, we have one more super chat from Trust Process. There was speculation that WBD owned a stake in AEW. Tony's never denied it. Any credence to that rumor, or has it been debunked?
I believe they own a stake. Yeah. As far as what it is, I don't know. I can't tell you 100%. I know Brandon Thurston thinks the same thing. Mm-hmm. I asked Tony flat out. He never denied it. His answer is that he has 100%
voting shares.
He has the voting shares. He has all the decision-making power. Do they have a small stake in the company? Again, I do not know, but I do believe so. I don't think that's I don't think it's a bad thing either. It's good that they're invested in it. That they're, it gives them more, more incentive to push it. So, I don't know, but I believe that that's the case. Yeah.
All right. I have a couple of quick questions about a topic that you very much enjoy based on how many times you've written about it, which is the movie from the 70s, the Verne Gagne movie, The Wrestler.
It's not a good movie, but I've watched it many, many times because it's always it brings me back to a different era of wrestling that it's like I have fondness for every era of wrestling. Not that I'm saying it's better or worse, but it's just different. And that early 70s AWA, early 70s pro wrestling was actually pretty cool, for what it was. Just like I think early 80s was pretty cool too, and then, obviously late 90s was pretty cool. There's different eras, but early 70s wrestling was pretty cool. I have a lot of fond memories of it.
All right. So my first question, in this movie, are tons and tons and tons of actual wrestlers using their real names?
In what sense?
I mean, they're just known as Dusty Rhodes or the Crusher.
Yeah. Other than Verne Gagne and Billy Robinson.
I know that's the question. Why did they change those guys' names?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Verne.
Because wouldn't it have sold, at least to the wrestling audience, better with Verne Gagne starring in the movie as Verne Gagne?
I don't have an answer for that. I think that they wanted it to be a fictitious thing, but yeah, like Ray Stevens and Nick Bachman were Ray Stevens and Nick Bachman, with the Bruiser and the Crusher were Bruiser and Crusher. The only guys that I can recall that they changed the name of were Verne Gagne, Billy Robinson, and Joe Scarpello was Jack Cutter, the guy who died early in the movie.
You're right.
So he had a different name. Those were the only three. Everybody else was, who they were. Billy Graham was Billy Graham. Wahoo McDaniel was Wahoo McDaniel. But I don't have a good answer for it other than I think that
Mike Graham, a very buffed out Mike Graham.
Yeah. Young Mike Graham, Eddie Graham, Wilbur Snyder.
Vince Sr., did they mention his name? But we knew it was Vince Sr.
I'm not sure, but we have Vince Sr.'s there. I think Mushnick's there. Dennis Hilgart's there. A lot of the promoters were there. I don't remember. I don't remember Barnett. And he probably not, because when that movie was being filmed, I think he might have still been in Australia.
And I think it would have been memorable if he was in it.
Barnett, maybe. But yeah, I saw, like Dennis Hildegard, Bobby, one of Bobby Heenan's friends. That guy was cool. Dennis Hildegard. I mean, he told me after he retired, he told me so many cool stories about the AWA. Once it was gone and the power of the Crusher and everything like that. Crusher's like really, it's kind of sad in a way that people, I mean, in Milwaukee and in the Twins and in the Midwest, older people all know the Crusher, you know, they all do. But, you know, everywhere else, I don't think, you know, and he was a terrible wrestler, but he was just, you know, I don't know, how do I say it? It's like, he was a product of the times. You know what I mean? It's like he was the drawing card. He was a character. His promos, like today, I don't know if people even consider them good promos, but for them, for that era, he was just a character that everyone remembered. I mean, God, did he have awful matches?
They both stole the movie, by the way.
Who, the Crusher and the Bruiser?
They were awesome in that movie.
Think more than Murdoch and Rhodes?
Yes, I liked their stuff a lot better than Murdoch and Rhodes.
I mean,
Murdoch was very subdued. He was just in sort of action scenes, you know, the fighting scenes. Dusty actually got to do the phone call, but I thought Bruiser and Crusher were awesome.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I thought that they were pretty cool characters. I mean, you know, I mean, Verne and the you know, I mean, I was fascinated by a lot of the movie because it's Verne's vision of what he wanted wrestling to be. And his frustrations were his real frustrations, you know, like the lack of media coverage, even though we draw all kinds of people and, you know, but also the exaggerations, you know, these guys work out 6 hours a day. It's like, fuck, nobody works out 6 hours. I was saying, let alone if you're driving 6 hours a day to these towns, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So the person who answers the phone in the wrestling office, I think the actress's name was Elaine Giftos.
Elaine Giftos.
Giftos.
Elaine Giftos, yeah.
So she gets this role because of how similar she looks to Mary Tyler Moore, right?
I have no idea. Okay? No idea. But the fact that you said that, and the fact that she does, means that there's a very good argument that that's the reason, but I could not tell you that for sure. They wanted a pretty girl to have a relationship with Ed Asner, and of course,
Ed Asner's like 100. He looks 100 years old in that movie, but he always kind of looked. He always looked
old. You know, Ed Asner and Bob Orton Sr. were like really good friends. Did you know that story? I looked up every reference of Ed Asner in the Observer archives, and so I got to read the Bob Orton stuff. They used to call each other, and even though like the movie was a bomb and everything, Ed Asner was always like very whatever the word was. Like when he'd go to Minneapolis, he would want to meet Verne. He wanted to go see Verne, even when Verne was, you know, pretty much dementia and all that. He felt like it wasn't like, oh, I got this role, and you know, of all the things I did, you know, this is probably like the worst thing I ever did.
Yes.
You know, because I mean, Ed Asner was like one of the great TV actors of all time, and he's in this bomb of a movie, you know, as the star of the movie.
Yeah.
And but he, you know, whatever, you know, I know Verne was very bitter that the other promoters never promoted the movie more. You know, there was a lot of problems with Verne and the other promoters when it came to that movie because Verne wanted it to be a big success, and like I don't even remember it. There's no way it even opened in the Bay Area because I would have seen it then. I didn't see this movie until like 10 years later, so it didn't even play in most of the country. I'm sure it never played in New York. I know it played in Florida for like a week. It played in the Midwest, but it got very little distribution. You know, I mean, most people saw it years later when DVDs came out, you know, and it was more easily accessed.
It's not easy to find. I think you can buy a used DVD. I don't even think it's in print for like new stuff. I searched through all the streaming services. Nobody had it. There's actually, you know what? There's one streaming service that I never heard of that if you signed up for some 30-day subscription, you could watch it. I actually watched it through YouTube because YouTube had like a non-copyright channel of some sort that allowed them to show it. So that's how I watch it. But it's really hard to find.
It's funny. I have the DVD of it, and the DVD, the cover and everything like that is so completely different. It acts like it's amateur wrestling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just so weird. And then there was a release of it that built it around Ric Flair being in the movie. And Ric Flair is in the movie for like one scene, you know, where I think it's like somebody goes, hit the lights, Rick. And it turns out the lights, they turn on the projector. that's it. With Jim Brunzell and I think Greg Gagne.
Was he in the scenes in which those guys were like training in the ring and Verne's like talking about all the training and stuff?
He might have been. I don't think so. I mean, I remember Dan Gable and Mike Graham and Wilbur Snyder and Eddie Graham. I don't even know if Brunzell was in there or Greg was in there.
Yeah. Okay, last question, then we'll get out of here.
Yeah.
So Verne does this movie, and I'm trying to think of like his reasoning. Like, what is the goal? What is he trying to get out of this? Other than, I don't know if he's trying to establish some relationships in Hollywood or something, but like the storyline is about the Super Bowl of wrestling.
He was trying to build up pro wrestling. In a mainstream way, and it did not go mainstream, but that was the mentality behind it. And, in its own way, maybe build up Verne Gagne and Billy Robinson and their feud. Because I remember they did use it in Hawaii, which the movie did open in Hawaii, and they were feuding in Hawaii when the movie was out because they would do promos. And they would, I remember Billy Robinson's promos. I don't necessarily remember Verne doing this, but he probably did. But Billy, said that like, we had the movie, but this one's real. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You got to do this in the movie, and that's fine. But this match is like, this is for the real championship and everything. So they did reference it in passing, in the build for the Verne Gagne Billy Robinson matches in Honolulu.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, like it sort of exists in its own universe, and then I just wondered what the fallout was. Like, what did he use?
There was no fallout. Nothing happened. It was a bomb, and nobody made any money. Verne was very bitter that nobody helped him out and promoted it in their own territories. They didn't want to promote it because it's all Verne's guys. Didn't help them, and it's just a piece of, it's one of the few pieces of that era. You know what I mean? You do get to sort of get the feel of what, to a degree, what AWA wrestling in the early 70s was. That's, to me, the what is it, the charm of the movie is you get that little slice of that. That was a boom period. You get the Bruiser and the Crusher and Murdoch and Rhodes and Superstar, not enough of them, but, people like that. And then a lot of Verne Gagne and Billy Robinson, and you kind of, and there's remnants, and they talk about Pedro Morales and Dory Funk Jr. in the Super Bowl of wrestling. They were the three world champions at the time.
By the way, wasn't Dory kind of old at that time too? And they're trying to push for the younger champion. And Dory
was born in he's 83, so he was born in 41. So he would have been 30-31. He just
okay,
looked
so
older because he was balding.
Not that old. Yeah,
because remember the scene where they're going, we want youth. We got to get you got to find someone to beat Mike, who Verne played. We want youth in here, and they all and it's like and the whole deal is just that, like, even if you wanted, nobody could beat Verne. That was the theme of the movie, is nobody could beat Verne. And he and all these promoters are, if you want this Super Bowl to happen, we don't want Verne in it because he's too old. We want somebody young. And Ed Asner's there and goes, like, Dory's bald. He goes, yeah, but he's 31 years old or whatever, 30 years, So the thing is and that's where Billy comes in, Billy Taylor, Billy Robinson, where, that's a hilarious scene when Lord Blears comes in and he's got this tape of Billy Robinson, and it's like, oh my God, I finally found the guy to beat Verne, meet Mike. And they built, the whole movie's built up to that climactic match at wherever it was, and the build up to the match, and Verne's machinations. It's actually like
manipulating the promotor into
working the promoter and working Billy, the whole time. You've been working Billy from the moment he got here. and
the whole like a lot of the conflict is based on the idea that people have died in the ring, and his wife wants him to retire. And it kind of dovetails into what we were talking about earlier in how violent wrestling could be.
But I mean, it's the thing of, like, Ray Gunkel had just died, and Ray Gunkel and Verne were contemporaries.
And Torres, right?
Torres had died. Alberto Torres had died at that same period. Yeah. They both died in 72. So I think this movie's like filmed in 73. So, and then, they have the guy die from the bombs away from Ray Stevens.
Right.
To kind of get that over. Yeah.
All right, that was a nice trip down memory lane. I did recently watch it, and it was a trip. That movie was a trip. By the way, there's a really good review on the website when Brian was writing in 2005, and the opening of his piece is, Dave said that because I'm so frustrated with wrestling in 2005, I need to watch The Wrestler to be reminded of how good wrestling used to be, or something like that. So
I don't know that it was. It's different. It's just a different thing, but I don't know. CMLL still feels like that to me. Other than the moves are totally different, but the feel of that. But yeah, I mean, look, it's charming in its way.
It was shocking watching it through me, because like I had this perception of what the movie was. I thought it was like way more slapsticky, but it's actually a really serious movie about something that a lot of people don't really take seriously, which was kind of what the reviews were about.
And that was the curse and the thing that Verne was trying to push. Verne wanted people to take pro wrestling as a sport, even though it wasn't. And it always bothered him that they would draw these big crowds and not get coverage, because in those days they never got coverage, and that people would think it was fake, even though it was fake. He just, they just hated that, that perception. And part of the idea is this movie is that it's to slap people in the face, and like people can die doing this, and these are great athletes, and they're making lots and lots of money, and it's not. And I mean, the big thing in this movie is it's not fake, but there's all these things, like the, whatever. That's Watts used to do that, where it's like, you talk in a way where you go, yeah, well, of course we manipulate this and we manipulate that, but the actual matches, those are real.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't look real. And like with Verne, it's like, yeah, of course, I'm doing this, and my promos are this, and everything's this, and I don't hate the guy, of course, but once the bell rings, that world title is worth, that was like the big thing. The mob guys wanted to buy off Verne to throw the match. And it's just like, Ed Asner's out there, and it's just like, you don't got enough money to buy Verne. You know what I mean? You can't buy Verne, you can't do this. So they tried to like threaten him by, beating up his girlfriend and beating him up.
And then the heroes of the movie come to make the save.
The Crusher and the Bruiser show up when they're about to do this. And then Verne shows up at the last minute after the fight's over.
He's like, yeah, where were you 10 minutes ago?
Yeah. There was once a fight with Verne and Bruiser, and Verne knocked him out.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And the Bruiser was like, I mean, the guy was like, he was a steroided out, dangerous guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the Crusher, like he wasn't a guy who was running around looking for fights, even though, he probably got in some. But the Bruiser was like a guy who would go to bars, like that old, go to bars and look for fights and look to beat people up, Yeah. And it was, and he was very, like he was a great heel for it. And then he became a great babyface in a lot of places because people believed in him, from those stories that they had heard and that they were true of being that guy. Cause I remember like they had a press conference in Chicago once. This is in that same era in like the early 70s. And, they're dressed in those really colorful 1970s outfits, Crusher and the Bruiser. And Bruiser goes out of the press conference and just goes, guys, I got a street fight waiting for me, or a bar fight waiting for me. So I got to go now. So that was just like the Bruiser. He was, he was just a character. He's a big drawing card, though. I mean, that's what it was.
All right. You and I will be back tomorrow night after the UFC show. And we'll talk SmackDown, and we'll talk whatever else we get to. I'm sure you'll get to the CMLL show. We can talk about that. And then the UFC pay-per-view.
Yep.
All right. For Dave, I am Garrett. To everyone, thanks for watching and listening. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Do you know anything about the next day rights for NXT?
Oh man, I just had a discussion with people in WWE, but
I know you had the SmackDown one moving from Hulu to Peacock.
I didn't ask about NXT. I probably should have. I'll ask. I'm not sure the answer. I know